Hello everyone. In this video we're going to write our first Python program in PyCharm. In the previous video I did an overview of the PyCharm IDE. If you're not familiar with PyCharm, you might want to take a look at that video. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new project and we're just going to call this first program. And I'm going to take pretty much all the defaults here. I want my base interpreter to be Python 3.9, which is the most current. And I'm going to hit create. So once the project is created, on the left-hand side, we have all of our file structure for this project. I'm going to create a new Python file. I'm going to right-click on my project name and click New and Python File. And now I have my editing space in the right-hand pane. As a reminder from the last video, take a look at Finder and my PyCharm projects folder, which is the default for my installation of PyCharm on this particular computer. So we just created the first program project, which created this folder. And there's our first program.py. That's our code file for that we just created to write our first program. So it's important to know that the file structure that we have in the computer matches up with what we have in PyCharm. And so we can access those files from either place. So one of the first things about Python that we want to be aware of is that it is case sensitive. And that means that commands and function names and much of what we do in code files, the naming of all those things are specific with regards to the case, uppercase or lowercase. So I'll use as an example one of the first commands we'll take a look at, and that is print. So print is what's called a function name. Functions always have parentheses after it. Function names in Python are lowercase. So you notice that I have print there, I have the parentheses after it, everything's fine. If I were to type print uppercase, you notice that the word print there is underlined in red. If I hover the mouse over it, it says unresolved reference print. What that's actually telling us is that the interpreter and PyCharm sees uppercase capitalized print as a completely different thing than the function print. That's because in Python, because it's case sensitive, if I have something, let's say, called age, and it's all capitalized, age, capital A, capital G, capital E, and lowercase age, and A, and then small ge, those are actually seen as three separate things, three separate objects in Python. That's because Python is case sensitive. So if you ever see that error, you see something underlined and you hover your mouse over and it says unresolved reference, that usually means that the case of that is incorrect in some way. That's one of the reasons that you would see that. So keep in mind case sensitivity. You'll hear about this a lot more as you proceed in Python. So I'm going to go back to this print statement. We're going to talk about print, the function print, a great deal more in actually the next video, but really simply just to sort of demonstrate our first attempt at a Python program. We want to basically print to the screen something. And inside the parentheses, if I put quotation marks, anything I put inside those quotes is what would be called a literal string. And that means that when I run this, whatever's inside those quotes will print to the console or the screen. So I'll type some text here. Notice that everything between the quotes in the editor is this sort of green color. It's indicating to us that that is a literal string. Case sensitivity does not apply to what's inside of a quote. The quote will take whatever I type. So the word how is capitalized, the first letter. There's a question mark at the end. Whatever I have inside those quotes will be printed to the screen. So if I were to run this, I'll right click and I click run. In my output, I see that sentence. Okay, and it's exactly the way that I typed it. If I type another print and quotes, and type a second sentence, again, this is surrounded by the quotes, so the capital N in none, the lowercase letters, the period, or the couple of periods, the individual single quote, all of that is seen as part of that literal string. Literal strings can be any what's called alphanumeric character. That's the alphabet A through Z, uppercase and lowercase, the 10 digits, and most of the special symbols that you have on the keyboard. For example, the @ symbol or the $ or the underscore, or those kind of things. If it's inside the quotes, it's just seen as characters. One of the interesting things about that is that digits, numbers 0 through 9, if they're inside the quotes, they're actually seen as part of a string and not numbers. We'll talk a lot more about that later as well. So if I run this again, notice that I now have 2 lines of output. That's because I've separated those 2 lines with 2 separate print statements. So this is our first Python program. If you made a mistake in any of this, for example, maybe I left off that last quote, notice that the red underline is very indicative of errors. And over on the right-hand side, there's a little symbol there as well. So if I hover a mouse over any of these, the PyCharm IDE gives us some information about what the problem is. And also, if I try to run this, I actually will get an error. You see this is all an error indicating, hey, you're missing something here. So you'll get really familiar with this because all it takes is to leave off one small thing. And actually that's good. I think it's really important to work through errors, to see errors occur, how PyCharm responds to those errors, and it helps us learn to troubleshoot code, which is a really critical skill in programming. So I'm going to go ahead and close my output window here and the program. I wanted to point out, you see that we have this Python file, and as I mentioned earlier, we can get to this either through PyCharm here or actually out in the file system through Finder on a Macintosh or File Explorer on Windows and Linux. And that Python file, if you need to send that to someone or make a copy of it or something, that's the code file. That's the file that just has that text, the print statements that we just placed here. And we'll discover as time goes on and you write more code, you'll end up with many .py files, Py files. And some of those files will be independent and others will actually work together. And we'll explore all those things going forward.